My name is Harrison Gillette. I'm in Business Law Section 116 at Appalachian State University, and I'm doing my presentation on broker-dealer revenue sharing. To understand revenue sharing, first we need to understand mutual funds. Now, a mutual fund is a composite of stocks, bonds, and other assets that the fund manager puts together to get his ideal risk-return ratio. There's two ways to get involved with mutual funds. The first is by going through the mutual fund companies themselves, such as Cap Trust, Harbor, Frost. But most people won't do that. Instead, most people will go through someone called a broker-dealer. A good example of those is Edward Jones, JP Morgan, or MetLife. Now, these are much more common. You can see them around town, and you also get the added bonus of not just having one company's funds to look at, but having multiple companies giving you a better variety of funds, and hopefully you'll be able to find a fund that fits your needs much better than just by looking at one company and what they have to offer. So what is this revenue sharing thing? Let me draw you a picture. So we got three main players here. We've got, we'll call these people the Smiths. They are an average American family. They are our investors. We have Edward Jones as the broker-dealer, and finally Cap Trust as our mutual fund company. So Mr. Smith decides he wants to invest in a mutual fund. So he takes his hard-earned money, goes to Edward Jones, and says, I want to be in a mutual fund. So they sit down, and at the end of the day, Mr. Smith is investing in a Cap Trust fund. Good for Mr. Smith, and saving for his future and whatnot. But what Mr. Smith doesn't know is that Cap Trust and Edward Jones have a relationship, and that whenever a Edward Jones client invests in a Cap Trust fund, Cap Trust kicks some of that money back over to Edward Jones. They are what's known as preferred partners, and for the broker-dealer, this leads to a clear conflict of interest. So let's talk about some recent settlements, some hanky-panky that went down with this revenue sharing game. Back in 2004, 15 firms were fined by the SEC a total of $34 million. Some of these firms, such as RBC, AXA, and Wells Fargo. Later that year, a much bigger fish came along, though, when Morgan Stanley got caught on the hook for $50 million in fines. And then at the end of a major SEC investigation in 2005, Edward Jones ended up paying $75 million in fines to the SEC because of their less than ideal revenue sharing situations. But in the end, these companies didn't care about these fines because they were making so much money doing it. Edward Jones in 2013 made just under $180 million via revenue sharing, and Ameriprise Financial made $210 million only from this revenue sharing system. So they don't care about these little fines the SEC keeps throwing around. They're going to keep making boatloads of money. So let's talk about the compensation types and how these companies are getting all this money. So in 2004, the big fad for compensation was directed brokerages, where the mutual fund company would say to the broker-dealer, hey, if you sell enough of my product, I'll send this huge transaction through your company, and you're going to make so much money. But the SEC looked at that and said, yeah, no, you can't do that. That's bribery. We're making this illegal. Don't do this. So they had to change the game. So now they have shelf space, or as opponents will call it, a pay-to-play system. So how does this shelf space thing work? Basically, if a mutual fund wants their fund to be up on the shelf where clients and customers and potential investors can see it, they've got to pay, otherwise they're not playing. So the main way to pay is these 12B-1 fees, which are supposed to be fees to help cover marketing or administrative expenses that the broker-dealer will incur while selling the mutual fund. These are allowed because of a distinction the SEC made between paying for distribution versus paying for distribution expenses. So paying for distribution is what we saw with the directed brokerage, where, hey, I'll pay you this money to go sell my fund. They've said that you can't do that. But with these 12B-1 fees, we have, hey, when you sell my fund, I'll pay any costs that you have while doing it. So that sounds different enough, but when you think about it, you're still getting more money for selling Fund A than you are for selling Fund B, giving you a clear conflict of interest. And because of human nature, Fund A is going to walk out that door far more than Fund B ever will. So let's talk to some experts, see what they have to say. So Dr. Haslam at the University of Maryland, a professor of finance, says this when asked about revenue sharing. It raises fees, costs, and expenses for the stockholders and leads to poor market timing and poor trades. Pretty straightforward and simple and to the point, and it's clearly bad in his opinion. Now this next one I stripped right from Edward Jones's website. It says, revenue sharing payments create a conflict of interest. They know it does it, and they continue to do it. The SEC makes them say this because they know it does it, but they allow it to continue to happen. Now, Senator Carl Levine saw this and had this comment to say, disclosure does not resolve the conflict. Just because I know that there's conflict of interest doesn't mean that there's now not a conflict of interest. There's clearly still conflict of interest. So why are we just making them say that? It's like saying, I'm going to lie to you, and then you continue to listen to what I have to tell you. I clearly just lied to you. This isn't a lie. This is true. So, in his opinion, the better course of action is to ban revenue sharing altogether. So, it's pretty simple. The fact that the experts are pretty much all together on the fact that revenue sharing is a bad situation. So, when I think about it, the biggest question that comes to my mind if I was buying a mutual fund is I would have to think, who's speaking to me right now? So I've got this guy and he's trying to sell me this mutual fund and he's supposedly helping me find the best one for me. Is he my advisor? Does he have a fiduciary responsibility to me to put my money ahead of everything else and get me the best deal possible? Or is he the mutual funds pitchman whose biggest issue is getting that extra dollar in his own pocket, regardless of what it does to me and my future? That's where I have a problem with it, because I don't know who I'm talking to and whether they're there to help me or help themselves. So in conclusion, revenue sharing is bad, leads to conflicts of interest, and in the end, there's a failure of fiduciary responsibilities where clients can't trust their advisors and get put in crappy funds and get something like this, where your dreams are the returns that you could have gotten, and the reality are the terrible losses that the crappy fund that you got stuck in is forcing you to be in. So here's my works cited, and I hope that you do not get screwed over by a bad advisor.